Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I'll never forget the Airbnb experience my wife and I had last year. It was meant to be a romantic weekend getaway in a small town not too far from the city where we live. The pictures on the listing showed a beautiful old Victorian house, well maintained and surrounded by lush gardens. It seemed like the perfect place to unwind and enjoy each other's company. What we didn't know was that we were in for the scariest experience of our lives. We arrived at the house late in the afternoon after a long drive through winding roads, surrounded by thick forests. As we pulled up to the driveway, the old Victorian house loomed large before us, casting a shadow over the rest of the property. It seemed much more imposing in person than it did in the photos, but we shrugged it off as just the effects of the gloomy weather. The host had informed us that they wouldn't be around for the weekend, but the key would be waiting for us in a lockbox by the door. We let ourselves in and immediately felt a slight chill, which I attributed to the old house's lack of insulation. We quickly settled in, unpacking our bags and exploring the house. It was spacious, with high ceilings and a grand staircase, but there wasn't something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. That night, as we lay in bed, I was awoken by a faint creaking sound. I tried to ignore it and go back to sleep, but the noise persisted. As I lay there wide awake, a creaking grew louder and seemed to be moving closer to our bedroom door. I tried to convince myself that it was just the house settling, or perhaps the wind blowing outside. Eventually, the noises stopped, and I managed to drift back to sleep, clutching my wife tightly for comfort. The next morning, I hesitated to mention the strange noises to my wife, not wanting to worry her or ruin our weekend. We went about our day, exploring the town and trying to enjoy our time together, but I still had a bad feeling from the night before. When night fell, we returned to the house, and as we prepared for bed, worry only grew stronger. As we lay there in the darkness, I could feel a heavy, oppressive presence in the room, as if we were being watched. I closed my eyes, hoping to drift off to sleep and escape the feeling, but the creaking sounds began again. This time they were louder and seemed to be accompanied by soft, barely audible whispers. My body tensed with fear, and I could tell my wife was awake too, her breathing shallow and uneven. I wanted to say something to comfort her, but the words wouldn't come. The creaking and whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent until it felt like they were right outside our bedroom door. Suddenly, the door burst open, a gust of freezing air rushed in, filling the room with an unearthly chill. We both screamed, our voices muffled by the wind as it howled through the room. The door slammed shut, and just like that, the room was silent, the oppressive presence gone. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, too afraid to sleep or even move. As soon as the sun rose, we packed our bags and left the house, not bothering to clean up or make the bed. We sent a message to the host, explaining that we had to leave early due to a family emergency and couldn't stay for the remainder of our booking. Once we were safely back in our own home, we tried to rationalize what had happened, chalking it up to our overactive imaginations and the creepy atmosphere of the old house. But deep down, we both knew that there was something more to our experience than just creaking floorboards and a drafty room. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop myself but obsessively researched the house and its history, trying to find some explanation for the terrifying events we'd experienced. After hours of digging, I came across an old local newspaper article. The article, dated nearly a century ago, detailed a gruesome murder that had taken place in the very house we'd stayed in. A man had killed his wife in a fit of jealousy, believing her to be unfaithful. According to the article, her body was found in the very bedroom where we'd spent our night of terror. The husband was later found hanging from a beam in the attic, an apparent suicide. The article went on to describe a series of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena that had plagued the house ever since. Previous owners and tenants had reported hearing strange noises, feeling cold spots, and even witnessing ghostly apparitions. Many had moved out within months, unable to cope with the constant fear. As I read the article, I felt a mixture of vindication and horror. While it confirmed that our experience wasn't just a figment of our imaginations, it also served as a chilling reminder of the malevolent force that seemed to linger in that house. We decided not to share our findings with the Airbnb host, not wanting to get caught up in any potential legal issues or damage their business, but we did leave an anonymous tip with the local historical society, suggesting that they look into the house's dark past. My wife and I still talk about our Airbnb horror story from time to time, and the memory of that night still sends anxieties. We become much more cautious when booking accommodations, making sure to thoroughly research not just the property itself, but also its history and the experiences of past guests. It was day one. The day started with excitement and anticipation. Jacob, Simon, and I had been planning this trip to watch the football match for weeks. We'd managed to get our hands on tickets, which was a pretty big deal, considering they'd sold out almost immediately. Our main priority was finding a cheap place to stay, as we knew we wouldn't be spending much time there. We found an Airbnb apartment in the city center, just a short walk from the stadium. The price was incredibly low, and although there weren't many reviews, we decided to take a chance. In hindsight, we should have been more careful. We arrived in the city in the afternoon and grabbed some food before heading to the apartment. As soon as we stepped into the building, we knew something was off. The dimly lit hallway had peeling wallpaper and a strange smell. The apartment itself was dusty and old, and the atmosphere was unnerving. We tried to laugh it off, but I could sense that we were all uncomfortable. To take our minds off the creepy apartment, we went out to explore the city. We found a local pub and spent a few hours watching other football matches and chatting with fellow fans. But as the night went on, we knew we had to head back to the apartment to get some sleep before our match the next day. Day 2. The night was long and terrifying. We had this strong thought that we were alone in the apartment. There were strange noises outside our door, like footsteps, muffled voices, and even scratching. It was as if a party was going on in the hallway, but we hadn't been invited. We tried to ignore the disturbances, but every time we closed our eyes, the noises seemed to get louder and more insistent. We began to hear other sounds too. Heavy breathing, tapping on the windows, and at one point, I thought I heard someone whisper my name. We were all on edge, unable to sleep or relax. The sense of dread only grew as the night wore on. When morning finally arrived, we couldn't wait to leave the creepy apartment behind. We didn't bother leaving a review for the host. We just wanted to put the whole experience behind us and focus on the football match. The game was incredible, and for a while, we managed to forget about the previous night's events. However, on our way home, all we did was discuss the strange occurrences from the night before. We compared notes on the weird noises and the eerie feeling of being watched. It was clear that we'd all experienced the same thing, which made it even more unsettling. When we got back, I decided to do some research on the apartment building. I told my friends at work, and one of them was shocked and told me of an old legend about that place and revealed a dark history of criminal activity and even deaths in the building. It had been dubbed the haunted apartment by locals, and we had unknowingly spent the night there. Sharing my findings with Jacob and Simon, we felt a mix of relief, and it was still hard to get over. It was somewhat comforting to know that we weren't the only ones who'd had a terrifying experience in the apartment, but it also served as a chilling reminder of the danger we'd unknowingly put ourselves in. We vowed never to stay in a sketchy Airbnb again, obviously, and we've been much more careful when booking accommodations ever since. As for the haunted apartment, we heard that it's been taken off the market. We can't help but wonder if others have experienced the same terrifying events that we did. But one thing is for sure, that eerie apartment will remain in our memories for the rest of our lives. I've always been a fan of Airbnb. I've stayed in dozens of them, both domestically and internationally. Most of my experiences have been amazing, meeting interesting hosts and staying in unique homes. But one particular stay I had was nothing short of a horror story. I'm not one to embellish, but I feel a need to share this, so others might learn from my experience. Last summer, I decided to take a solo trip across the Pacific Northwest, starting in Seattle and ending in Portland. I came across this super cool, vintage-looking cabin in the woods. The reviews were great, and the photos made it look like the perfect rustic getaway. So, without giving it too much thought, I booked it for a weekend between my city visits. After a long day of driving and hiking, I finally reached the cabin. It was located deep in the forest, down a winding dirt road. The pictures didn't do it justice. It was even more charming and secluded than I had imagined. The cabin was built in the 1930s and had been lovingly restored. The front porch boasted a beautiful view of the surrounding woods. I was thrilled. The first few days were everything I hoped for. I spent my days exploring the nearby trails and my evenings enjoying the quiet solitude of the cabin. But then, on the fourth day, things took a turn for the worse. I had just returned from a hike, and as I approached the cabin, I noticed something odd. The front door was slightly ajar. At first, I thought I might have forgotten to close it properly, but then I realized that a few items I left on the porch were missing: my backpack and a pair of hiking boots. I felt my heart race and my stomach churned with anxiety. Had someone broken in? But why would they take only those items? I hesitated, then cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. To my relief, the interior of the cabin seemed untouched. My belongings were still where I had left them, and nothing appeared out of place. Trying to convince myself that I had just misplaced my things, I decided to search the surrounding woods. I spent hours combing the area, but my backpack and boots were nowhere to be found. Feeling uneasy, I returned to the cabin and locked the door. I tried to ignore it, but it clung to me like a wet blanket. I barely slept that night, listening intently for any sounds outside. The next day, I decided to set up a makeshift security system with my phone. I downloaded an app that would record any motion near the cabin and send alerts to my phone. I left to explore a nearby waterfall, but the entire time I felt on edge, constantly checking my phone for alerts. When I returned, my heart sank. There was an alert, and when I played the recording, I saw someone on my porch rummaging through my things. The person was wearing my missing hiking boots and seemed to be taking more of my belongings. The stranger was tall, thin, and had a wild, unkempt appearance. I couldn't see their face, but just the sight of them freaked me out. I called the host immediately, but they couldn't be reached. I debated whether to call the police, but I had no idea who this person was or if they were dangerous. And besides, would the police even bother to come out this far into the woods for a non-emergency? That night, I barricaded the door with furniture and slept with a kitchen knife beside me. I barely slept, straining my ears for any sounds outside. I had 2 more nights left in the cabin, but I decided that in the morning, I would pack my things and leave. This was no longer the peaceful retreat I had hoped for. As soon as daylight broke, I started packing my belongings, moving as quickly as possible. I kept glancing out the windows, half expecting to see the stranger lurking in the shadows. Once everything was packed, I moved the furniture away from the door, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. My car was parked a short distance away and I hurried towards it, feeling exposed and vulnerable. I couldn't help but notice that the forest, which had once seemed so serene, now felt sinister and oppressive. As I reached my car, I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. I glanced around nervously, and that's when I saw him. The stranger was standing at the edge of the woods, watching me. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but their presence was enough to send a bolt of terror through me. I finally managed to unlock my car, tossed my bags inside, and practically leaped into the driver's seat. I didn't even bother to buckle my seatbelt as I turned the key and hit the gas. My tires spun on the dirt road, kicking up dust as I sped away from the cabin. I didn't even slow down until I had reached the main road, miles away from the cabin. As soon as I had cell reception, I called the host again, finally getting through. I told them everything that had happened, my voice shaking with fear and anger. They sounded shocked and apologetic, assuring me that they would contact the police and look into the matter. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.